You know, we spend a lifetime being told that the ladder of success has no end and that we must keep climbing step after grueling step until we reach some mythical peak of perfection. But let me tell you something I discovered back in those early days, long before the stages and the suits, when I was just a young man trying to find my way. There is a peculiar kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from working hard, but from the relentless, suffocating pressure of trying to improve yourself every single second of the waking day. Most people will tell you that the greatest danger is standing still, but I've found there's a different kind of danger, a quiet, heavy burden that comes when you turn your life into a never-ending construction site where the dust never settles and the tools are never put away. It's the realization that even improvement, if pursued without wisdom, can become a burden that breaks your spirit instead of building your future. You've been running so hard toward a better version of yourself that you've lost sight of the person who's actually doing the running. You've become a stranger to your own peace because you're too busy trying to fix what you've been told is broken. So I have to ask you, and I want you to be very honest with your heart right now, are you truly building a life you enjoy, or are you just desperately trying to outrun the person you are today? It is a fascinating thing to observe how we as human beings are the only creatures on this planet that have the capacity to strive for more than what we currently are. An alligator doesn't wake up and decide he wants to be a better alligator. A tree doesn't feel the weight of expectation to grow taller than its DNA allows. Only you and I have been given this incredible, sometimes overwhelming gift of self-awareness and the desire for progress. But here's the paradox that most of the motivational world refuses to tell you. That very same drive, that relentless hunger to be more, do more, and have more, can eventually turn into a master that whips you instead of a vision that pulls you. We live in a culture that treats the human soul like a piece of software that needs a constant update, as if the current version of who you are is somehow obsolete and shameful. I've seen men who have achieved everything the world says they should want, the titles, the accounts, the influence, and yet they look like they've been carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders for 20 years without a single day of rest. They aren't living. They are merely performing a role in a play called constant improvement. The tragedy for the many is that they never start the journey of self-development at all. They drift through the seasons of life like a leaf in the wind, never taking the helm of their own ship, never deciding that they want to be anything more than what they were yesterday. They live in that gray twilight of mediocrity, and that is a story we've told 1,000 times. But there is a different kind of tragedy for the few, the strivers, the achievers, the people like you who are listening to this because you want to reach your full potential. Your tragedy is that you can become so addicted to the idea of who you might be tomorrow that you start to despise the person you are today. You've turned the noble pursuit of excellence into a frantic race to escape your own perceived inadequacies. You've forgotten that the reason we design our lives, the reason we study the books and attend the seminars and refine our disciplines, is to create a life that is actually worth living, not just a life that looks good on paper to a bunch of strangers. If your philosophy of growth makes you miserable, if it makes you feel like you are never enough regardless of your progress, then I would suggest to you that your philosophy is flawed. Think of yourself as the architect of your own existence. A wise architect understands that there is a time for the blueprint, a time for the heavy lifting, a time for the pouring of the foundation, and a time for the intricate work of the interior. But the architect also knows that the ultimate purpose of the building is to be inhabited, to be enjoyed, to provide shelter and beauty. If the architect never stops changing the walls, if he never finishes the roof because he found a better material the next town over, the house is never a home. It remains a permanent construction site, filled with dust, noise, and the constant smell of wet cement. You cannot live in a construction site forever. Your mind and your spirit need to know that there is a place where the work is done for the day, where the tools can be set aside, and where you can simply sit in the space you've built and find satisfaction. When we lose that ability to find peace in the present, we have allowed the burden of improvement to crush the joy of being alive. We have confused the becoming with the being, and in that confusion we lose the very essence of why we wanted to improve in the first place. I spent years in those early days, especially during what I call my shaker days, when I was selling supplements and trying to build a name for myself, thinking that if I just worked a little harder on my personality, if I just mastered one more skill, if I just tightened my schedule one more notch, then finally I would arrive at some magical plateau of worthiness. I was treating my life like a problem to be solved rather than a mystery to be lived. I realized that most people are either doing too little or they are doing too much for the wrong reasons. The masses are stuck in the mud of low expectations, but the ambitious are often caught in a hurricane of their own making. They believe that if they stop for one breath, if they stop trying to optimize every minute of their existence, they will lose their edge. But the sharpest edge is useless if the hand that holds it is shaking from exhaustion. True success is not found in the constant frantic motion. It is found in the deliberate, calm design of a life that balances the intensity of the harvest with the necessity of the rest. We must learn to be students of our own capacity, to know when to push the sail into the wind and when to drop the anchor and listen to the water. This is the great challenge of the modern achiever: how to maintain the hunger for progress without letting that hunger eat your soul. It's about understanding that your value is not a variable that changes based on your productivity. You were born with a certain dignity that no amount of success can increase and no amount of failure can diminish. When you realize that, the pursuit of better stops being a desperate attempt to prove your worth and starts being a joyful expression of your potential. You start to improve because it's a beautiful thing to see what you're capable of, not because you're terrified of staying as you are. You begin to design your days with a sense of craftsmanship rather than a sense of panic. You become the master of your development rather than its slave. It takes a certain kind of maturity to look at your progress and say, I am moving toward a better version of myself, but I am also perfectly okay with the man I am in this very moment. If you don't find that balance, you will eventually reach a day where the burden of becoming becomes so heavy that you'll want to drop it all and walk away into the woods. So, I must ask you to look at the blueprint you've been following lately. Is the house you are building intended to be a sanctuary for your spirit? Or is it just a monument to your own restless dissatisfaction? I remember a particular evening during my time in the direct sales business, back when I was working closely with my mentor, Mr. Earl Shoaff. We were in a small, dimly lit diner after a long day of meetings and presentations. I had my journals spread out across the table, my pens lined up, and I was meticulously tracking every conversation I'd had that day, every mistake I'd made, and every way I could possibly improve my delivery for the next morning. I was obsessed. I was 25 years old, and I had tasted a bit of success for the first time, but instead of feeling exhilarated, I felt like a man walking through deep sand. I was trying so hard to become the person Mr. Shoaff said I could be that I had stopped breathing. I was suffocating under the weight of my own expectations. I looked across the table at Mr. Shoaff, who was sitting there perfectly at peace, just watching the steam rise from his coffee, and I asked him a question that came from a place of sheer desperation. I said, Mr. Shoaff, how much longer does this take? How much more do I have to change before I can finally feel like I've arrived? He looked at me with those wise, piercing eyes that had seen the rise and fall of many ambitious men, and he didn't give me a new technique or a better closing script. He just sighed and said something that stopped my heart. He said, Jim, the problem is that you've turned your life into a laboratory and you've forgotten that you are the inhabitant, not just the specimen. You are so busy dissecting your performance that you've forgotten to experience your life. You're trying to build a cathedral, but you're treating yourself like a pile of cheap bricks that isn't good enough for the foundation. He told me that I was suffering from the burden of the ideal. I had created this image of a perfect Jim Rohn, a man who never faltered, never felt tired, and always had the right word. And I was punishing the real Jim Rohn for not being that man yet. It was a moment of profound shame for me. I realized that in my quest to become better, I had become arrogant toward my own humanity. I was treating my current self with a kind of cold disdain, as if this version of me was just an obstacle to be overcome. I spent the next few days in a strange sort of mourning. I felt ashamed that I hadn't been grateful for the progress I had already made. I had gone from being a clerk at Sears to building a growing organization, but I hadn't allowed myself a single moment of genuine satisfaction because I was always looking at the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. That gap had become a canyon that swallowed all my joy. Mr. Shoaff taught me that if you don't learn to find peace in the middle of the process, you won't find it at the finish line either. Because once you reach that goal, your ambitious mind will simply create a new, higher goal, and the cycle of dissatisfaction will start all over again. You will be a professional achiever and a professional miser when it comes to happiness. He told me about his own early days, his own shaker days, and how he had to learn the hard way that the wind will always blow, the seasons will always change, and there will always be more to learn. But if you don't learn to enjoy the smell of the air today, you're just a slave to a tomorrow that never arrives. It was a sobering lesson. I realized I was tired. I wasn't tired of the work. I loved the work. I was tired of the constant internal criticism. I was tired of the voice in my head that said, not good enough, try harder, read more, stay up later. I had become a tyrant to myself. And that is when I understood that the greatest skill in life isn't just the ability to improve, it's the ability to integrate that improvement into a soul that is already at rest. You have to be able to say, I am working on my future, but I am at home in my present. If you can't do that, the weight of self-development will eventually become too much to bear. You see, the mind can handle the labor, but the heart cannot handle the constant rejection of its current state. You have to be your own best friend on this journey, not your own harshest judge. You have to allow yourself the grace to be a work in progress without feeling like a failure for being unfinished. I want you to think about this as we go through the rest of our time today. I want you to consider if you've been holding yourself to a standard that doesn't allow for the simple joy of being alive. Because if you have, you are heading for a burnout that no amount of motivational quotes can fix. You are heading for a day where you will want to throw away all the books and all the goals just to get a moment of peace. I don't want that for you. I want you to have the success, but I want you to have the soul to enjoy it. I'll leave a few moments of quiet at the end of this video for you to really sit with this, to let the dust settle in your own mind, and to perhaps apologize to yourself for being so hard on the person you've been trying to change. We need that silence to hear the truth. We need to stop the noise of becoming so we can remember the value of being. It took me a long time to forgive myself for that period of my life, for those years where I was so driven that I was brittle. I had to learn that the most productive thing I could do some days was to simply stop and appreciate the person I had become, even with the flaws, even with the unfinished business. I had to learn that my worth wasn't tied to my latest production report or the size of my bank account. It was tied to my ability to be present, to be kind to myself, and to see the beauty in the struggle. So, let me ask you this. As you look back on the last few months of your own journey, have you been so busy trying to fix your life that you've forgotten to actually live it? Now, to truly understand why this fatigue of the soul happens, we have to look at the very laws that govern this universe, the same laws I learned watching the seasons turn on our farm in Idaho. You see, nature is the ultimate teacher of balance, yet we often think we are smarter than the soil. We've all heard about the law of sowing and reaping, and we usually focus on the hustle of the sowing and the glory of the reaping. But there is a quiet, hidden part of that law that most people ignore. The land must rest. If a farmer tries to squeeze a harvest out of the same soil every single month, year after year, without ever letting the field lie fallow, he doesn't become the most successful farmer in the county. He becomes the man who destroyed his own inheritance. The soil becomes exhausted, the nutrients are depleted, and eventually, nothing, not even the best seeds in the world, will grow there. Your mind and your spirit are exactly like that Idaho soil. You cannot constantly demand a new harvest of betterment from yourself without giving your soul the time to simply exist, to replenish, and to integrate what it has already learned. I've watched so many people treat their lives like a ship where they are constantly adjusting the sails. We talk a lot about the set of the sail, how it determines where you go regardless of which way the wind blows. And that is a powerful truth. But I want to take you deeper today. What happens to the man who is so obsessed with the perfect set of the sail that he never looks at the horizon? What happens when the wind is screaming at 100 miles an hour? A gale force storm is upon him. And instead of taking the sail down to survive, he's still standing there trying to trim it for maximum efficiency. He's going to capsize. He's going to be lost to the sea, not because he was lazy, but because he didn't know when to stop improving his position and start focusing on his survival. There are times in your life when the most philosophical thing you can do is not to read another book or master another habit, but to simply drop the anchor and wait for the storm of your own ambition to pass. We have been sold this idea that if we aren't moving forward, we are falling behind. But that's a lie of the marketplace, not a truth of the spirit. Sometimes standing still is the only way to catch your breath so that when you do move, you move with precision instead of panic. I remember my own shaker days, those high-intensity years where I was trying to prove to the world and to myself that I was a winner. I had my lists, my goals, my tapes, and my disciplines. I was a machine. But I realized one day that I was becoming a very efficient version of a man I didn't even like. I was so focused on the how-to that I had completely lost the why. I had mastered the art of the harvest, but I had forgotten the art of the feast. What is the point of filling the barn if you are too tired, too bitter, and too hollowed out to sit down with your family and enjoy the bread? Even improvement, when it becomes an end in itself, becomes a form of vanity. It becomes a way to avoid the terrifying silence of asking, who am I if I'm not producing something? This is where the burden becomes heaviest, when your self-worth becomes a hostage to your self-improvement. We start to believe that we are only as valuable as our latest breakthrough. We treat our character like a piece of marble that we must constantly chip away at. But we forget that if you chip long enough and hard enough without a plan for the finished statue, eventually you just end up with a pile of dust on the floor. You have to know when the sculpture is beautiful enough for today. You have to realize that the better version of you is not a destination you reach. It is a companion you walk with. And sometimes, that companion needs to sit down on a park bench, watch the sunset, and not talk about goals for an hour. If you can't do that, you aren't a leader of your own life. You are just a high-functioning refugee from your own inadequacy. The most successful people I have ever met, the ones who are not only wealthy in their pockets but wealthy in their hearts, are those who have mastered the rhythm of the seasons. They know when it is time to push, when it is time to plant, and when it is time to let the snow cover the fields and just wait. They don't feel guilty for the winter. They don't try to force a rose to bloom in January. They understand that the quiet times are not wasted times. They are the times when the deep roots are formed. If you are feeling that crushing weight of being tired of becoming better, it might be because you've been trying to live in a permanent summer. You've been trying to defy the laws of the universe by demanding constant growth without any period of dormancy. You've become so addicted to the high of progress that the normalcy of being a human being feels like a failure. But I'm here to tell you that the winter is necessary. The rest is a discipline, not a distraction. We must analyze this problem with a sober mind. The world will always demand more of you. The marketplace doesn't care about your inner peace. It only cares about your outer production. If you don't set the boundaries for your own development, the world will eat you alive and then ask for seconds. You have to be the one to say, the work is done for now. I am enough for today. You have to be the one to realize that your shaker days were meant to build a foundation, not to be the permanent state of your existence. If you keep shaking long after the foundation is set, you'll just end up cracking the walls. True wisdom is knowing the difference between the hunger that drives you to greatness and the hunger that is simply trying to fill a hole in your soul that only self-acceptance can fix. So I want you to look at your current pace and your current mental state and ask yourself this very difficult question. Are you actually growing into a bigger person, or are you just becoming a more sophisticated version of someone who is still running away from himself? Now we must come to the moment of truth, the part where we stop talking about philosophy in the abstract and start looking at the man or woman in the mirror with a cold, honest gaze. It's time for a mental audit. Most people are terrified of an audit because they're afraid the numbers won't add up, but I'm asking you to perform an audit of your soul's energy. I want you to look at your journals, your calendars, and your daily disciplines, and I want you to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. Is your self-improvement program a bridge to a better life, or has it become a wall that keeps you from actually living one? I've spent decades teaching people how to set goals and how to refine their characters, but I've also seen the dark side of this pursuit. I've seen people who have become so disciplined that they've lost their spontaneity, so focused on their personal brand that they've lost their personality, and so obsessed with their future self that they have absolutely no kindness left for their current self. They are working for a master who is never satisfied, a master who looks at a 98% score and asks why it wasn't 100. If that is you, then you aren't an achiever. You are a prisoner in a cell of your own making, and the bars are made of your own high expectations. Think back to why you started this journey. Usually we start because we want freedom. We want the freedom of the farm, the freedom of the marketplace, the freedom to design our own days. But look at what happens to so many of us. We trade the chains of mediocrity for the chains of perfectionism. We trade the boss we hated at the warehouse for a boss inside our own heads who is 10 times more cruel. When I was a young man working as a stock clerk at Sears, I dreamed of being more. I wanted to be like Mr. Shoaff. I wanted the wisdom and the poise, but there was a period where I tried to force that growth so hard that I became brittle. I was so afraid of slipping back into that version of myself who couldn't pay his bills that I wouldn't allow myself a single moment of rest. I was running away from my past so fast that I couldn't see the beauty of the present. And I suspect that some of you are doing the same thing. You are terrified that if you stop becoming, you will suddenly realize that you aren't enough as you are. You're using self-help as a way to avoid the terrifying reality of self-acceptance. You think that if you just read one more book or master one more morning routine, you'll finally have permission to be happy. But let me tell you a secret that took me years to learn. Happiness is not a reward for a job well done. It is the fuel that allows you to do the job in the first place. I want to challenge you to look at your to-do list for tomorrow and see how many of those items are there because they truly move you toward your vision, and how many are there just to soothe your anxiety about not being productive enough. We've turned busy into a badge of honor, but often it's just a way to stay distracted from the fact that we don't know who we are when the work stops. If you can't sit in a room for 30 minutes without a book, a podcast, or a plan, then you aren't the master of your mind, you're just its employee. You've become so addicted to the betterment cycle that you've lost the ability to be still. And that is why I want to remind you right now, don't rush to the next video when we get to the end of this session. Don't go looking for the next hit of motivation. I've intentionally left a period of silence at the very end of this video because you need to practice the discipline of doing nothing. You need to face the silence without the armor of your goals. You need to see if you can still like the person you are when the improvement stops for a moment. This is the hard audit. Are you growing or are you just performing? Growth is quiet, organic, and often involves periods of doing absolutely nothing while the transformation happens beneath the surface. Performance is loud, exhausting, and requires constant validation. If you are tired of becoming better, it's likely because you've been performing for an audience that doesn't even exist. You've been trying to live up to a version of yourself that is an impossible ideal, and you're exhausted from the weight of the costume. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to look at your life and say, I am going to stop trying to fix myself for a while and just see what happens if I enjoy myself. That doesn't mean you become lazy. It doesn't mean you go back to the shaker days of having no direction. It means you change the spirit of the work. You move from a place of, I must become this to be worthy, to, I am going to explore this because I am curious about what I can do. One is a burden, the other is a dance. One leads to burnout, the other leads to a legacy. So let's get very real. When was the last time you did something just because it brought you joy, with no concern for how it improved your market value? When was the last time you allowed yourself to be a beginner at something without the pressure to turn it into a side hustle or a line on your resume? If the answer is, I can't remember, then you are in a dangerous place. You are at risk of losing the very thing that makes life worth living in exchange for a collection of achievements that will eventually feel like ashes in your mouth. You have to be willing to protect your soul from the demands of your own ambition. You have to be the one to stand at the door of your mind and say, no, we are not going to optimize today. Today, we are just going to be. This is the ultimate challenge for the high achiever. It's easy to work hard. It's hard to stay human while you're doing it. It's easy to change your bank account. It's hard to keep your heart from becoming as cold as the coins inside it. As you think about the next steps in your journey, I want you to sit with this. If you reached every single one of your goals tomorrow, but you were still the same tired, restless, and self-critical person you are today, would all that success actually matter? There comes a day in the life of every truly ambitious person when you must stand at the edge of your own achievements. Look out at the horizon you've been chasing and realize that the most profound step forward you can take is to finally stop the fight. I'm not talking about quitting. I'm not talking about retreating into the shadows of mediocrity or giving up on the magnificent potential that God has planted in your soul. I am talking about the moment you realize that the frantic, desperate, and often violent pursuit of becoming better has been a substitute for actually being great. There is a massive difference between a man who is driven by the fear of being inadequate and a man who is drawn by the vision of what is possible. When you reach that day of realization, the burden falls off your shoulders. You stop trying to fix a broken version of yourself and you start to cultivate the powerful version of yourself that has been there all along, waiting for you to stop the noise. I want you to feel the weight of that truth right now. You have been so hard on yourself for so long, running through the seasons of your life like a soldier in a war that ended years ago. It's time to lay down the weapons of self-criticism. It's time to stop treating your life like a project and start treating it like a masterpiece that is already in progress. Think about the sheer energy you have wasted on the shaker days of your mind. Those days where you shook the foundations of your peace because you thought you weren't moving fast enough. I've been there, staring at the walls of my office, wondering why I wasn't as polished as the men I admired, why I didn't have the answers as quickly as Mr. Shoaff did. But the breakthrough didn't come when I worked harder. It came when I surrendered to the process. It came when I realized that a tree doesn't try to grow. It simply stays connected to the source and follows the rhythm of the sun and the soil. You are part of that same nature. You have within you a seed of greatness that knows exactly how to bloom if you would just stop stepping on it with your constant demands for perfection. This is the call to strength I want to leave you with. The strength to be still, the strength to trust that the work you've already done is enough to carry you through the next season, the strength to look at your flaws not as failures, but as the unique textures of a life well lived. If you can master this, you will become a person of such gravity and such peace that the world will stop and wonder how you achieved so much while appearing so calm. You will have moved from the hustle to the flow, and that is where the real power resides. I want you to take this realization with you into the rest of your life. Don't let the marketplace or the critics or the voices of your own past tell you that you are unfinished. You are a work of art that is being refined, yes, but even an unfinished painting has beauty in every stroke. Your value is not at the end of the journey, it is in the footsteps you are taking right now. So as we prepare to close this chapter of our conversation, I want you to prepare your mind for something we rarely do in this loud and busy world. I have mentioned this twice before, and now I'm telling you for the third and final time, I'm going to leave you in silence. This isn't just empty space on a video, this is the most important part of our time together. It is the time for the seeds we've planted today to actually take root in the soil of your spirit. Don't rush away, don't click on the next distraction, stay here. Stay with the person you've spent so much time trying to change and see if you can finally offer that person some grace. Let the silence do the work that words cannot. Let the peace of being wash away the exhaustion of becoming. And you've done enough for today. You've climbed enough for today. You've changed enough for today. Now it is time to simply exist in the space you've built for yourself. Listen to the rhythm of your own heart. Feel the dignity of your own existence. This is the moment where the burden of improvement is lifted and the joy of being alive takes its place. I want you to carry this stillness into your tomorrow, knowing that you don't have to be perfect to be significant and you don't have to be constantly changing to be growing. You are already on your way. You are already enough. And in the quiet that follows, I want you to ask yourself one final deep question that will echo through the halls of your soul long after I am gone. If you were never allowed to change another thing about yourself for the rest of your life, could you find a way to love the person you are sitting with right now?